My name is Amanda, and I am here with... Oh, Matthew, you are muted.
Okay, Matthew.
There we go. And we are with the Tampa-Hillsborough County Public Library. As I was saying, this is our One Book, One Night program, which is part of a series in which we read the opening parts or a particularly juicy part of a book that you can read in, yes, you guessed it, one night. Whether that's because it's a more slim volume, a novella, or it is just unputdownable and you will just want to read it and gobble it up in one sitting. Tonight we're theming it around our NEA Big Read book selection. Our book selection is An American Sunrise by Joy Harjo. And tonight we'll be reading her first memoir, which is Crazy Brave. Okay, Matthew, why don't you tell us a little bit, though, more about the NEA Big Read?
I will be glad to. We're about in the middle of the series. It started at the beginning of the month. It's going to culminate on December 3rd with a visit from the author. We'll mention that in a minute. But Together We Read is what we say about these book-inspired projects. And so NEA Big Read is from the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. And they encourage libraries to apply for the grant and pick a book and organize all kinds of projects, activities, and, like tonight, programs that are inspired by or connected to the book in some way. So if you go to hcplc.org/NEA Big Read, you'll find out not only about some of those activities and book giveaways, but also the programs that we have remaining. And as Amanda mentioned, we have a YouTube site. So as we are doing these programs, they're getting recorded and posted to the library's YouTube channel in the NEA Big Read playlist, including the one from tonight. But the book that we chose for NEA Big Read this time is called An American Sunrise, as Amanda said, written by Joy Harjo, U.S. Poet Laureate, 3-term Poet Laureate, which is pretty much almost unprecedented. She's only the second person to do that. And we are luckily going to be seeing her on December 3rd, Friday, December 3rd, for a virtual event. And actually, I think we can go to the next slide, because for that virtual event, there's going to be some book giveaways of her latest and greatest book, Poet Warrior, which is a memoir, the latest memoir. And you have to register and attend the event in order to be eligible to win a copy. But even if you do not if you're not one of the lucky winners, there are other ways to read it through the library's website, as well as the book that we're going to be experiencing tonight, Crazy Brave. You can go to hcplc.org/books and find out about all the different formats that exist. We have a lot of Joy Harjo's books in our collection in different formats, including An American Sunrise, which is read by her as an audiobook on Hoopla, and so on. But as you can see here, Poet Warrior promises to be a really interesting, yet another interesting book from Joy Harjo, who writes so beautifully and so deeply. And we're very excited to be able to read some of her writing tonight. So yeah, that's a little bit about NEA Big Read and the upcoming author session. It's going to be a Friday, December 3rd at 6:30 p.m. Register now, because the spots are actually filling up very, very quickly. So if you want to attend, register as soon as you can.
Okay, so let's go in and test some of our interactive features. We are actually going to start with a poll. So it's going to pop up on your screen. We'll give you a little time to vote on this poll. And the theme of tonight is, of course, memoirs. So our first question is, let me launch this poll. If you were going to write a memoir of your own life, how would you center it? Would it be about the first 10 years of your life, those childhood years, the most recent 10 years, so what you've been up to lately? You would just do all of it from start to finish? Would you do maybe one specific year or a specific time in your life, maybe a period of years like your college years or your high school years? And then finally, would you do something else? And you can tell us, maybe you have a different format in mind, or you've read a really cool format. You can tell us in the questions section if you have a different idea. So I'm going to give you guys a little more time to vote on that, and then we are going to go ahead and see the results. So it looks about like half of you have voted, and then we're going to see a few more of the results. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And it looks like, let's see those results.
Oh, all of it for the win.
It is. And well, I kind of like reading that the full story, but sometimes they're interesting when somebody's gone through a specific event, they're writing about one maybe time in their life. But okay, let's go ahead and turn that off. And just throughout the night, we are going to be doing more polls like that, so feel free to participate. We love seeing your answers. And then this is, as we're going into the reading, this is something to keep in mind. At the end, we are going to be using that question section to get your answers to have a group discussion. And our two questions we have about this book are, do you think reading a memoir by an author changes how you view their writing or maybe their art or their artistry? So this one's very specific because Joy Harjo is both a writer of poetry and a musician. And sometimes you read about your favorite television star, movie star, athlete. Does it change the way you interact with the other thing they do, whether it's sports, music, arts, writing? We'd love to hear that. And then this is a fun one. What would you title your memoir if you were going to write one? So we would love to hear some of those titles if you don't mind sharing them with us in the question section. And just remember, you can submit questions and comments at any time. We're just going to circle back around at the end and read those. So feel free anytime during the discussion to submit those things. Okay, Matthew, let's go ahead and turn off our cameras for now so we can concentrate on the reading. And we will go ahead and get into the first section. Once I traveled far above the earth. This beloved planet we call home was covered with an elastic web of light. I watched in awe as it shimmered, stretched, dimmed, and shined, shaped by the collective effort of all life within it. Dissonance attracted more dissonance. Harmony attracted more harmony. I saw revolutions, droughts, famines, and the births of new nations. The most humble kindness made the brightest light. Nothing was wasted. East. East is the direction of beginnings. It is sunrise. When beloved sun rises, it is an entrance, a door to fresh knowledge. Breathe the light in. Call upon the assistance you need for the day. Give thanks. East is how the plants, animals, and other beings orient themselves for beginnings, to open and blossom. The spirit of the day emerges from the sunrise point. East is also the direction of Oklahoma, where I was born, the direction of the Creek Nation. Once I was so small I could barely see over the top of the back seat of the black Cadillac my father bought with his Indian oil money. He polished and tuned his car daily. I wanted to see everything. This was around the time I acquired language, when something happened that changed my relationship to the spin of the world. It changed even the way I looked at the sun. This suspended integer of time probably escaped ordinary notice in my parents' universe, which informed most of my vision in the ordinary world. They were still omnipresent gods. We were driving somewhere in Tulsa, the northern border of the Creek Nation. I don't know where we were going or where we had been, but I know the sun was boiling the asphalt. The car windows were open for any breeze as I stood on tiptoes of the floorboard behind my father, a handsome god who smelled of Old Spice, whose slicked back hair was always impeccably groomed, his clothes perfectly creased and ironed. The radio was on. Even then, I loved the radio, jukeboxes, or any magic thing containing music. I wonder what signaled this moment, a loop of time that on first glance could be any place in time. I became acutely aware of the line the jazz trumpeter was playing, a sound I later associated with Miles Davis. I don't know the words jazz or trumpet. I don't know how to say it, with what sounds or words, but in that confluence of hot southern afternoon, in the breeze of aftershave and humidity, I followed that sound to the beginning, to the birth of sound. I was suspended in whirling stars. I grieved my parents' failing, my own life, which I saw stretching the length of that rhapsody. My rite of passage into the world of humanity occurred then, through jazz. The music was a startling bridge between familiar and strange lands. I heard stomp dance shells, singing. I saw suits, satin, fine hats. I heard workers singing in the fields. It was a way to speak beyond the confines of ordinary language. I still hear it. Over and over and over. When you gonna come back, baby? Over and over and over. Why did you leave me? The god of all things reached behind the counter, pulled up a sour dish rag and cleaned off the mess. We all went tumbling down. I said over and over and over. We all went tumbling down. My mother's singing attracted me to her road in this world. It is her song that lit my attention as I listened in the ancestor realm. Secret longing rose up in her heart as she sang along with the radio. The music threading the atmosphere in what was known as Tulsa, Oklahoma, or T-Town in 1951, was songs for falling in love, songs for falling out of love, songs to endure the purgatory of longing, of improvisational swing jazz, country, or songs just for the sake of kicking it. Tulsa was a Creek Indian town established on the Arkansas River after my father's people were forcibly removed from their homes in the South in the mid-1800s. When they arrived in these new lands, they brought that sacred fire. They brought what they could carry. Some African people came with them as family members, others as slaves. Other African people arrived independently, established their own towns. European and American settlers soon took over the lands that were established for settlement of Eastern tribes in what became known as Indian Territory. The Christian God gave them authority, yet everyone wanted the same thing: land, peace, a place to make home, cook, fall in love, make children and music. Every soul has a distinct song. Even the place called Tulsa had a song that rises up from the Arkansas River and around sundown. I heard the soul that was to be my mother call out in a heartbreak ballad. I saw her walking the floor after midnight. Though she was crazy in love with my father, she sensed the hard road ahead of them. I heard Cherokee stomp dancers in the distance. They were her mother's people. They danced under the stars until the light of dawn. I saw a young Irishman cross over waters, forced by politics and poverty. He married into the Cherokee people. He is one of her ancestors. Over in the east, I saw a hill above the river. There was my mother's dream house. She had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. Everyone had a bed and shoes. No one ever went hungry. Because music is a language that lives in the spiritual realms, we can hear it, we can notate it and create it, but we cannot hold it in our hands. Music can help raise a people up or call them to gather for war. The song my mother-to-be was singing will make my father love her forever, but it will not keep him out of the arms of other women. I will find my way to earth by her voice.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. And we're going to hear a little bit more of the book soon, but first we're going to interrupt and ask you another question. Because Crazy Brave is a memoir, has to do with history, and history has to do with your upbringing and your family. We want to know, are you interested in learning more about your family history? So we'll give you just a quick moment to vote. And very interested in hearing the responses. Obviously, yes or no is a response, but you may already know a little bit about your family tree, or you may be interested but not quite sure how to get started. So I'm going to count down and give you a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think we can close the poll, Amanda. And wow, really evenly split here. Glad to see the no is now one of the choices, although that's fine. It can be interested in different things, but definitely some folks attending tonight very interested in learning more about family history or have already learned a little bit, which is terrific. And I want to especially address the last category there. If you are interested in not quite sure where to start, well, we here at the Public Library would like you to start with us. As a matter of fact, if you go to hcplc.org/genealogy, you will find a number of terrific resources listed there, including the Ancestry Library Edition. And as you can see, just by the numbers alone, millions and millions of entries there that you can discover that may connect with something you never even knew about your past and your family and your, who came before you in your lineage. So that's an excellent way to start. Now, I should mention Ancestry Library Edition is only available on site, so you do have to be in one of our physical libraries to access it. But there are a lot of libraries, and if you go to our website, you'll see the location that's closest to you, and certainly you can ask any of our librarians to help you out with your search to get started. So yeah, that's a little bit about our genealogy resources and family history. And I think it's time to read again, right, Amanda?
It
Okay.
surely is.
All right. Though I was reluctant to be born, I was attracted by music. I had plans. I was entrusted with carrying voices, songs, and stories to grow and release into the world, to be of assistance and inspiration. These were my responsibility. I am not special. It is this way for everyone. We enter into a family story and then other stories based on tribal clans, on tribal towns and nations, lands, countries, planetary systems, and universes. Yet we have our own individual soul story to tend. As I approached the doorway to Earth, I was hesitant to enter. I kept looking over my shoulder. I heard the crisp voice of the releaser of souls urge me forward. Don't look back. And I remembered how Earth is a heavy teacher, yet is so much loved by the creator of planetary beings. I did not want to leave mystery, yet I was ever curious and ready to take my place in the story. My mother wanted a baby to show her love for her husband, my father. My father didn't know what he wanted. If he was going to have a child, he preferred a son, though in his everyday world in the racist Oklahoma in the 50s, it was difficult for an Indian man, especially one who had no living Indian father or grandfather to show him the way. Most people on my father's side of the family passed from this place relatively young. I am one of the oldest living relatives of our family line. My generation is now the door to memory. This is why I am remembering. My father was born of tribal leadership. Manawi, who was one of the leaders of the Red Stick War, which culminated in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, the largest Indian uprising in the country, was his grandfather, 6 generations back on his mother's side. Manawi is still a beloved person to the Creek or Muskogee people. Samuel Chikota, another grandfather, was the first principal chief after we settled in Indian Territory or Oklahoma. Osceola, the Seminole warrior who refused to sign a treaty with the United States government, was our uncle. As I write this, I hear the din of voices of so many people and so many stories that want to come forth. Each name is a tributary to many others, to many places. I see the spirit of New Orleans. I hear the singing of the spirit of Congo Square. Congo Square was originally a southeastern Indian ceremonial ground. It became a meeting place for tribal peoples, Africans and their European friends, lovers, and families. They gathered there to dance, to enjoy the music and the food wrapped in cloths and gourds that they brought to share. This was the place of gossip, news, philosophy, and history. These people, our ancestors, want to be recognized. They want to be remembered. I see also Osceola's mother, Polly Coppinger, as she stands there with her hands on her hips and a reddish glint to her black, heavy, kinky hair. She was born during times of great transition for the Muskogee Nation. She was charismatic, with a decided stubbornness, and passed this on to her son. I have seen her African ancestors often in my dreams. They gave me a doorway in a dream one night when I was in my very early 30s. It was a waking dream. I was in a village in West Africa. It was another time. I was wrapped in a mat after fasting for several days. I was carried through several realms and saw many things. I was gone for weeks, yet I returned the next morning as a young woman with 2 children living in an apartment in Santa Fe. Some things I remember and some things continue to be kept from me. My father's grandfather was Henry Marcy Harjo, a man in good standing with the Muskogee community. He was of the Eufaula Canadian tribal town and became a Baptist pastor with a ministry among the Seminole in Florida. He was a transitional principal chief for one day in the early 1900s. He and my grandmother, Katie Manawi, even owned a plantation in Stuart, Florida, and traveled there with the children every winter. The plantation was a large tract of land for farming. The land had been used for growing pineapple. My grandfather didn't like pineapple and had every one of those plants dug up. His wealth came from the family's allotted lands in Indian Territory. In November 1905, before Indian Territory became the state of Oklahoma, a huge oil gusher was discovered on the allotted lands of Ida E. Glen. This became known as the Glen Pool. It was the largest oil field in the Southwest. The family lands were part of this oil find. The family became wealthy. My father's mother, Naomi Harjo, and my aunt, Lois Harjo, were well educated and received their BFA degrees in art at Oklahoma City University. My aunt, Lois Harjo, told me that family once owned much of the town of Okmulgee. My grandmother Naomi died of tuberculosis when my father was a small child. My father had to cross a gulf of sadness, left by her absence to find a place for my mother, and then me, and the rest of his children. His mother was unreachable except by memory. In the end, we must each tend to our own gulfs of sadness. Though others can assist us with kindness, food, good words, and music, our human tendency is to fill these holes with distractions like shopping and fast romance, or with drugs and alcohol. My father's father, Alan W. Foster, married the caretaker of his children. My father gained stepbrothers and a half-sister. He grew up in a house that became known as the Foster Estate, though it was on his mother's creek land. When I was growing up, my father received enough in oil royalties to support his love for fine cars. I remember him taking apart and putting back together his black Cadillac and his Ford pickup. When my father passed from this world, the oil royalties were divided among his children. By the mid-'80s, my brothers, sister, and I were each receiving about $30 a month. Then the oil companies stopped the payments. Stories can be very demanding and need care and assistance. The family oil story has a spirit and it wants my attention.
Thank you, Matthew. That was good. Okay, so before we go into the next section, let's take another break for a brief second book shout out. So our shout out is also inspired by tonight's theme of memoirs and autobiographies. Actually, if you do want to go back and visit and you want another memoir, we did read Isabel Allende's latest one for our September One Book One Night. That is on our library YouTube channel. But we are also going to shout out The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. This is a story by Walls, who was a journalist. She worked for MSNBC in its early days, and she wrote this story because she came across as a very polished professional, which she was. And she said people made a lot of assumptions about her life and her lifestyle, but she actually grew up in extreme poverty, with itinerant poverty with alcoholic parents. And it's the story of her surviving her childhood and, the coping her brothers and sisters did to get through that. And the interesting thing about this book, which I have read, is although it sounds like it will be a very depressing read, I give kudos to the author that it really moves and it makes you want to pick it back up. Some books are very, very good, but very hard to read at the same time. Matthew and I were discussing that earlier. So, some books they affect you deeply, but they are hard to read because of the subject matter. And I will say for this one, it is very good, and she does go through a lot of difficulties, but it was just presented in a way that it was not a struggle to read. I will say that. So if you do want to check out The Glass Castle, which I believe has since been made into a movie starring Brie Larson as the main character, and I think Woody Harrelson plays her father, you can go ahead and check that out. We do have it in our library catalog in both the physical, and we have it in electronic versions if you are more interested in that. Okay, and our next resource shout out is actually our library stories. It's the invitation to share your library story. So of course, here at the library, we love sharing good stories with you, whether it is from a wonderful author like Joy Harjo or Jeanette Walls, or whether it is a community story or a history. But we also love to hear your stories. So you can go to hcplc.org/stories, and you can actually submit your library story. And I think the coolest thing about this, and it's not just your story. You can tell us whether you had a wonderful experience at the library, whether it's something you remember from growing up, or a staff member that you have connected with, or a resource you want to share. You can tell us your story. You can share photos with us. We love that. But I think the coolest thing about this, promoting it, which we have it all time, but to keep it in mind during the NEA Big Read, is the reminder that the library really is a community made up of each and every one of us. So it is the physical buildings, but then it is the people in the community who come in and make the library. And I really have a good time going through and reading everybody else's library stories, because it does remind me of what the library means to each and every person. And sometimes that's similar, which is cool, and sometimes that is very different, which is also cool. So I really do recommend, even if you are a little shy to share your story at first, go through and check out and read some of those library stories. And that is hcplc.org/stories. And I believe Matthew has shared it in the chat section if you just want to find the link. Okay, let's go on to the third and final section of the reading for this evening. As I continued the journey to enter this realm, I watched my mother and father meet at the Casa Loma dance hall. My mother was beautiful and magnetic. She was that mix of Cherokee and European that dazzles. She was meticulous in her dress. Her journey to Tulsa took determination on her part. She had to oppose her father, a man who favored her over her 6 brothers, and set her mother against her. She left her sharecropper family shack with her best friend, Elvira Guerra, and they headed to Tulsa with money they had made from picking crops. She set herself to mate for life. My father was ephemeral. He was about 10% body. The other 90% of him was spirit, and it was often unreachable, even to him. This earth can be difficult and jarring. Joy can be known only through despair here. My father was by nature sensitive. He instinctively understood cloud language, the meaning of birds and their appearances, and water. What took precedence in his expression was his father's violent hand. My father was sent from home at a young age to a military academy. He learned anger as a method to control sensitivity. When my father asked my mother to dance, she shyly but surely entered his arms. They had just met, yet it felt like they had known each other for as far as forever can reach. When my mother first saw this man, who would be my father, she knew he was the one, despite his reputation for being a man who loved women. There were many women chasing after him, buying him drinks, pulling on him to dance. They wanted to touch him for his sensual good looks. I imagined that my mother struck a light inside the deepest room in his heart. His charisma was power that had come down from the ancestors. It was something given to us to use to assist others. I was close to my father through the end. He never spoke of my mother in a negative manner. My parents danced. What dancers they were, their feet jumping in swing, together in time. My mother-to-be was fire. Those of fire move about the earth with inspiration and purpose. They are creative and can consume and be consumed by their desires. They are looking for purpose, a place in which to create. They can be so entranced with the excitement of creation that their dreams burn up, turn to ashes. My father-to-be was of the water and could not find hold on the banks of earthliness. Water people can easily get lost, and they may not comprehend that they are lost. They succumb easily to the spirits of alcohol and drugs. They will always search for a vision that cannot be found on earth. Their dance was an ancient dance, one that most of us who take on breath know. It is fate setting the story into place. Within the year, I was born to the earth, of water and fire. Because I came through them in this life, I would be quick to despair and understand how to enter and emerge from ancestor realms. I had no way to translate the journey and what I would find there until I found poetry. This is my heart. This is my heart. It is a good heart. Weaves a membrane of mist and fire. When we speak love in the flower world, my heart is close enough to sing to you in a language too clumsy for human words. This is my head. It is a good head. Whirs inside with a storm of worries. What is the source of this mystery? Why can't I see right here, right now, as real as these hands hammering the world together? This is my soul. It is a good soul. It tells me, come here, forgetful one. And we sit together. We cook a little something to eat. Then a sip of something sweet for a memory, for memory. This is my song. It is a good song. It walked forever the border of fire and water, climbed ribs of desire to sing to you. Its new wings quiver with vulnerability. Come, lie next to me. Put your head here. My heart is close enough to sing. Okay, that is the end of our reading for this evening. So let's
Great
go.
selection. Great selection of images.
Oh, well, I'm sure we will get into the discussion questions soon, but let's go into our final poll, Matthew.
That's right. So I think this is a perfect question for what we just heard because it was so evocative of the different senses that we have as human beings. And so when it comes to memories, what what is really evocative for you? What when you think about the memories of your own life, what do you most associate it with? Sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell? There's some, there was discussion of food in that last passage, and obviously that covers a few different areas of that, and food is very connected with memories, as are different sites that we've seen. So please take a few seconds to vote and let us know. I mean, it's kind of impossible to pick, isn't it? But
Yeah.
yeah, it
What
really
is
is.
yours, Matthew? What is your most evocative sense memory trigger?
I wish I could say smell, but the truth of the matter is my sense of smell is very, very, very weak.
Oh,
And so it probably is sound. I grew up, music was very, very big in my family growing up. And so I there's all kinds of music that really mean different things to me and my family experiences.
I think so. I think
All
I would
right.
agree with you there. I think it is. I think a song can really take you back to a place in your life. So, and it looks like,
Yeah.
well, I'll let
Yeah.
you read the results.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but we were just talking about sounds, and that has part of it. But sights kind of win the day here with about 2/3 of the vote. And so yeah, that's very interesting to hear. If you have any specific things that go along with that, please do share them in the question section, and we can try to read those out before we conclude.
And I think as you know, Matthew, I think something interesting too is because Joy is also a musician. I think the way she weaves in this, even though we're reading poetry and we're not singing it, the sense of musicality in there, and she does speak quite a bit about that. So I found that interesting in her books, but also her poetry as well. So something to look forward to if you read this book.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think, Matthew, it is time for us. You're going to review the discussion questions with us, and we'll go ahead and come back on camera.
Sounds good. All right. So if you do have any responses to these questions, please do share them in the section there, or maybe it's just something to think about and share when you're sharing your library experiences with the link that Amanda shared earlier. If you share them in the next couple of minutes as we are winding things down, we'll be sure to read them out loud. But here are some things to think about and discuss when you are reading either Crazy Brave, Joy Harjo's first memoir, or any memoir, really. And you can read off the questions there, Amanda.
Okay, well, this one is particularly as Joy is an artist in a different medium. She's a writer. So, do you think reading a memoir by an author or maybe a musician or an actor, does it change the way you interact with their art? So, knowing more about Joy's life, does it change the way that you interact with her poetry? And then, or in a more general sense, knowing more about somebody's life, does it change the way you view them in their other role, whether that's actor, musician, sports figure? Politician, whatever it is. And then the other question, a kind of fun one, is what would you title your memoir? So, an interesting fact about this is Joy's last name, Harjo, is the title Crazy Brave is the meaning of her last name. So, Harjo means, in the Muskogee language, it means brave or so brave as to be crazy. So, that is where she got the title of her book.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, Amanda and I were discussing memoirs before the session today, and I was thinking like, do I even read memoirs? I couldn't even think of that because I've read biographies
right.
and I think and then I started kind of searching around. I was like, oh yeah, I've read that one. I've read that one, and sometimes it's you can think of something as either an autobiography or a memoir, and sometimes it's maybe somewhere in
Right.
between. Um, but I think to your point, Amanda, lots of presidents and first ladies have written memoirs, and those
Yeah.
are always very interesting. You mentioned sports figures. One of the memoirs that I remember reading, although he is not a writer, is tennis player Andre Agassi wrote a very interesting and at times very intense memoir of his own story. And I remember hearing something about the person who helped him put the book together and how his memory of his life was pretty encyclopedic.
Oh,
And it was a very interesting thing. It was one of those things where occasionally I would be driving on a long drive and it felt like I literally had to pull over. So I'd pull over and read because I didn't want to wait any longer to, to
oh,
read
I've
that
been there
chapter.
before where I can't even wait. The audio's too slow. I gotta, gotta read it. I think that one was interesting too because I have not read that one, but I do remember when it came out, the book reviews. There were a lot of revelations about his life that I think the public did not know anything about. So
Very surprised about, yeah.
it was a shocking for a lot of people. I think for me it really depends on if I find that person interesting.
Yes.
Like we said, there's politicians, first ladies, which are pretty well in the realm of memoirs because they are just intertwined with so many big world events. But I mentioned I'm reading Dave Grohl's memoir right now, The
Right.
Storyteller. And I
Yeah.
would definitely recommend that. Much like everything he seems to do, it is just breezy and conversational and comes off as charming. So, oh, I do have to mention that if you like something that's a little bit cheesy, a little bit fun, and you enjoy 80s movies, check out Rob Lowe's memoir, Stories I Only Tell My Friends. Another library staff member and we both discovered we read this one.
Right.
It's not like it's not something you really brag about reading, but it is definitely it's a fun and funny. I think he kind of has leaned into that Rob Lowe persona, and that's where the book comes from. So if you want a
That's right.
lighthearted
For
one
all you children of the 80s out there.
to contribute, it's
Um,
not too challenging.
yeah.
It's out there. So,
I'll also shout out David Sedaris. He has many memoirs based
oh
on his
yes,
own journal entries, and he may have a new book out right now. We were just talking about that, and also we were talking about two books that were connected with the Holocaust. One of them was Night by Elie Wiesel, and the other one was.
it is the Diary of Anne Frank, which is a very classic.
Yeah.
Uh, it not only just encapsulates what's coming on in the time period, but also a coming of age, which I think is why it is so memorable and so many people of so many different generations relate to it. Now, Matthew, it looks. Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
I was
No,
going to
you
say
go ahead.
really quickly, both of them, especially Night, I think, would definitely qualify for one book, one night, because Night is a very slim novel.
It
Um,
is. We have discussed
and
using that one before, so we may see it in a future program coming soon.
yeah,
Well, it looks like we are not getting as much audience response, but that's okay because we have
yeah.
had a lot of participation. Matthew, do you think the reading somebody's work, does it change the way you view them, or is it pretty much you are separating the artist and the art?
Well, going back to the original thing that I shouted out, I would say for the tennis player Andre Agassi, it did change a bit because as a sports figure, as a kid, I thought, he was just cool, right? And a good player, and that was kind of the tall and short of it. But when I read that, my eyes were really opened, and it not just because of kind of how smart he was about his life. Not that he always made smart choices, but
Hindsight's
uh,
2020.
it does really open thing. It opened things up to me about who he was and who he was aspiring to be because he really acknowledged kind of very openly, all the different sort of missteps that he had made, as well as all the things that drove him and continue to drive him to this day. And it was a very human experiential thing because, I think we all feel this way that we sometimes struggle to figure out what is the right thing to do or what's the next best thing to do. And oh man, why the heck did I do that? And so, we oftentimes put celebrities or sports figures on a pedestal, but the fact of the matter is they are special in some ways, but we also have so much in common with them when it comes to those internal struggles and that learning curve. And that learning curve is so important to us in the library because of how important learning is. So that's what I really got out of it, and it did change my view of him in a big way and got me thinking about my own life, which is something that memoirs can do effectively.
Well, I think it can be a Pandora's box. Sometimes it gives you a deeper understanding or the intricacy of their art, all the things you didn't realize that inform them and influence them and the intricacies. But it can also, you can find out some things you don't like, and that can say, oh, that was my favorite song until I knew, this singer did that. So I think we will go ahead and wrap up on that note. I do want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We have had a wonderful time reading with you. I do want to recommend this book. If you liked the direction it goes on in that beautiful, she just has beautiful prose because she's a wonderful poet. Her story reads like that. So we definitely recommend checking that book out. We do want to remind you, if you want to contact the library, I know we shared a lot of great resources. Maybe you have the questions about genealogy. Maybe you want to find out more about how to share your story, or maybe you just want to get your first library card. Well, you can always contact us by phone at 813-273-3652, or you can contact us online at hcplc.org/contact. And I do want to remind everybody, you can find a central hub of all of our NEA Big Read information on our website at hcplc.org/NEA Big Read. You're going to find cultivated book lists if you want to find Crazy Brave or any of the Joy Harjo's other books for youth and adults about poetry, cultural history, Indigenous history, Native American history. You can find those. You can also find registration links for all of our events and some really great links to other resources to learn more about this subject. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us on this evening, and we hope we see you at a program very soon.
Happy reading, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.